Let's do this, guys. Welcome to Talking Saratoga, a weekly podcast with insight on the latest news, debate, and discussion from Saratoga Springs, a city that has never suffered from a shortage of opinions. I'm Robin Dalton, a New York City girl turned Saratogian, city council veteran, and mother to a bunch of kids who are probably running around unsupervised, this time in New York City, not even on Caroline Street. Mom, thanks for watching them. I'm joined by my co-host, Dan DeFedericis, a native of the Buffalo suburb of Chickamauga.
Very good. Very
I
good.
got it. A retired New York State Trooper, past police union leader, attorney, publisher of the Saratoga Report, husband and father to two beautiful girls, and a lifelong beleaguered Bills fan. Adam Israel is a lifelong Saratogian, local business owner, Pop Warner dad, and most recently dipped his toes into politics as an independent candidate for Commissioner of Finance. A quick reminder that the opinions expressed on Talking Saratoga are our own and do not represent any other group, person, or organization. We welcome all perspectives and opinions. We welcome all perspectives and opinions while on Talking Saratoga, as long as they are expressed honestly and with mutual respect. So, what's going on this week, guys? It's been a big week. I know that there's been some crime. Dan, did you want to jump into that, or do you want me to start with that?
Sure. Yeah, I can. Last night, the Saratoga Police Department put out a release, and this would be Tuesday night, saying that the release said that there were 4 robberies, all close together, some on South Broadway at businesses there, one on West Avenue, apparently perpetrated by the same person, and that they were actively investigating it. This morning, actually, briefly last night on social media, they announced they had somebody in custody. Then they expanded on that this morning, and they do have a suspect in custody who I believe was also accused of a similar robbery down in Ballston Spa. And that sort of led me. The reason I was interested in this, obviously, it's real and it's important. A robbery is a very serious crime. And Adam, because you've lived here the longest of the three of us, I wanted to talk to you. We sometimes have this sense of Saratoga is utopian. There's no crime here, and of course that's not true. But because this is such a beautiful city, upscale city, regal with the horse racing and so forth, we tend to sometimes overlook certain things. But it reminded me that people have told me, and that's what I wanted you to expand on. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, Saratoga Springs was not the tony little town that we know today. It was very different, but I never experienced that back then. Could you kind of explain to those that haven't lived here that long or don't know it, how Saratoga was 30 years ago?
Hey, Dan, real quick, I'm just going to read off the list of places that were robbed just for the details before Adam hops in. So on Saturday, February 19th at 5 p.m., the Super Smoke and Save at 109 West Avenue was robbed. On Monday, February 21st at 1:45 a.m., the Extra Mart at 154 South Broadway was robbed. At 4:22 p.m., I Love New York Pizza at 26 Congress Street was robbed. And at 4:30 p.m., Post Time Wine and Spirits at 170 South Broadway was robbed. So those are the details of the robberies, but didn't mean to interrupt. Take it away, Adam. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, thanks for the background. Yeah, Dan, I could say, I was born in Saratoga in the late 70s, and you saw Saratoga back then wasn't the city it was today. It wasn't as prosperous. It wasn't nearly as prosperous. So you saw there actually was, I would say, a fair amount more crime back in the the 70s and 80s than say the 90s and the early 2000s, where Saratoga started to go through this renaissance, and a lot of the dilapidated buildings got fixed up. The clientele or the inhabitants or the residents of Saratoga didn't fall into that. I don't want to say poverty line that caused, but it was a nice mix of small town, big town. We're moving from that now. It's getting back into, we're getting a lot of people in our city from all over, and we're really seeing this on a national level, right? With homelessness and crime. And real quick, I'll tell you one thing. I never saw any hard drugs in the schools in Saratoga. And I guess now, now there's unfortunately multiple young men and women who are passing away, from fentanyl and heroin. So this crime is certainly coming back into Saratoga.
I got to jump in and say one thing though, which is I think kind of what you were describing, Adam. Back in the 70s and 80s, I wasn't here. I wasn't alive for some of that time. But from what my understanding was, when there was a problem in Saratoga, whether it be crime, whether it be the downturn in the local economy, there was really collaborative feel to how people were coming together to solve that problem in the community. And I feel like that's kind of what we're lacking these days. You know, when something happens, whether it's a crime wave or whether it's an issue with the track or whether it's an issue with businesses, I feel like there's a lot of finger pointing instead of kind of that return to, okay, let's come together as a community and, you know, not just write a check to make this go away, but really come together and collaborate and get our hands dirty and try to fix the problem, whatever it may be. Do you think that's an inaccurate assessment, Adam, or is that inaccurate?
No, I think you're exactly right. And again, this kind of trickles down from a national level now of just finger pointing and screaming over each other and blaming instead of coming together and saying, listen, here's a problem. Everybody's, a lot of people could hold some responsibility for this. How can we all make slight changes to address these issues? Dan, how about you with your law enforcement background?
Yeah, what I had a question for Robin in her role when she was Commissioner of Public Safety. At what point of a serious crime, would you as Commissioner of Public Safety sort of step in to at least have discussions with the Chief of Police of what is being released to the press, what is going on, and how would that interaction go? If could you explain, like, where was there a rough line you would step in, and how that interaction would go?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the most part, you know, I'm not aware of every single crime happening on a day-to-day basis. Every Wednesday, I would get a report from the police department that would show me the activity for the previous week. But typically, it was the chief or assistant chief that was bringing to my attention if there was a trend happening, like the one we just saw, the one we're talking about right now. There was a trend of these robberies. And so that would warrant a release to the public to let them know that this had gone on, they were looking for a suspect, or a suspect had been arrested for these particular crimes. But what's released to the public and what isn't released to the public is left entirely to the police department, because a lot of the things they withhold on purpose are, you know, specific because they don't want, for example, someone knowing that they're onto them, knowing that they're onto a group of people, and so they're going to withhold certain pieces of evidence. And Dan, you'd probably be able to speak to this and articulate this way better than I am. But for me to write a press release about something like this without checking with them would be like bananas and would probably wreck an investigation or compromise an investigation somehow. So in terms of what's being released to the public specifically, I leave that up to them. But when, you know, when I see things or hear things like, okay, there have been 4 robberies in a short period of time, whether they used a weapon or not, that's something that the public needs to know about. And not to go on too long here, but a lot of people don't realize why I got involved in public safety in the first place. It was because back in 2014, there was a rape in my own neighborhood. There was a rape just a few blocks away from where I live that went unreported in the press. And when I found out about it as a neighbor, I was furious. And so I was that person who went around to the neighborhood collecting signatures and went to the city council, who, and at the time, Commissioner Mattison, saying, hey, this thing happened and there was no communication. Like, you need to do better. Neighbors need to know. And Commissioner Mattison ultimately was really receptive of what I was saying, and he addressed the issues as they were in 2014. So this kind of awareness and interaction and communication to the public, I think, is critical in terms of public safety in a city like this one.
Robin, as public safety commissioner, at what point, you know, how many of these robberies would have to happen before you would summon the Batman?
I do have my bat light positioned in my office every now and then, but it's usually Spidey. You know, I don't know if you remember the Spider-Man that would come along every now and then. And
yeah, right. Yeah, show up in town. We need this Spidey. If you're watching, we need you right now, buddy. It's getting dangerous.
Come on back. We loved you. We loved you, Spidey. But yeah. You know, I also think that people forget that this is gambling town, you guys. This is a gambling town. And there are bank robberies that happen on a consistent basis. And 9 times out of 10, these robberies are being driven by people who have just lost their shirt gambling. I mean, that's what I hear from the police. I mean, that really tracks. That's a large part of the problem.
Yeah.
When I lived on Union Avenue, right when track season started is when our cars were broken into. It's just a different dynamic when gambling is involved.
Dan, as a police officer, if you this guy, I mean, committing 4 crimes, you know, of this magnitude in that short of a time, it seems like this guy almost wanted to get caught, right? I mean, is this behavior indicative of just him wanting money, or some? You know, do you think maybe they do want to get caught?
it was inevitable, right? There was almost a desperation note to what was going on there. First of all, congratulations to the police department for quickly wrapping this up. An assist from Boston Spa, but they were all over it. Good for them. And but yeah, this was not a sophisticated series of crimes, right? This was someone that had a lot of desperation going on in their lives. It sounds like, and yes, terrible crimes, but there's a human element to that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, I don't think people commit crimes to get caught. But I do think, to me, this is just purely my impression. To me, this reads like someone who perhaps was under the influence, perhaps had a drug addiction problem, didn't have a weapon, but was this desperate to get cash. That to me says they're feeding some area that can't be fed without money, and they desperatly have to do it.
Yeah.
So if I were,
he did claim to have a gun, though. He did claim to. He never showed one, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, props to the police department for keeping us safe. I think they do a great job. I do wish that Saratoga Springs as a community was a bit less reactive to this stuff, because it does seem like every time, a crime is perpetrated, and God knows we want to keep this as safe a community as possible. This actually is one of the safest communities in New York State, if not America. But we're not a bubble. We're not immune to crime. And we advertise ourselves as the place to come play. We advertise ourselves in the summer to come drink and gamble. And then people are shocked when a crime occurs. And I just don't really understand that disconnect sometimes, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. One of the other things I know we wanted to talk about, Dan, I know that you had wanted to talk about especially, was there's a proposal to build a new 6-story mixed-use building at 269 Broadway, which is right next to Spa Catholic. And it's back in the news this week as it's now under review by the city's planning board. So we've never, one of the things you noted in our little rundown here was that, almost every time a new building is proposed, we get a lot of haters, right? We get a lot of negative feedback. We get a lot of people who are like, it's becoming Condo Saratoga. It's becoming Bonaccioville. This is not being proposed, I might add, by Bonaccio. But I know this project was just narrowly approved by the Design Review Commission last month, and there are still really strong opinions on whether or not the project should be allowed or not. What are your thoughts on it? And is this, is this something you guys think should be built? Is it appropriate for the area? What are your thoughts on it?
Adam, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. I did have a chance to briefly speak to Ms. Samantha Bosshard from the Preservation Foundation about this, and I said, just what is the major issue with that? And she said, we're not against projects. We're not against them generally. We're not against necessarily this one. I think if I quoted her properly, it's the size and scale of this one. It just dominates that location. It's right up against the sidewalk. She did credit them for listening to feedback and adjusting, but she said there's still too much there, right over the sidewalk, and they moved the top floor back a little bit, the 6th floor. To in response to the feedback, but the cornices are still right over it, and it just dominates that location. A behemoth, in my words, is what she said. And then Spa Catholic, or at least the Archdiocese of Albany, apparently has agreed to this because they have an arrangement regarding a buffer area, an easement area in between the two properties. I don't know of any organized neighborhood opposition. But it's, as you said, this is a constant discussion. Whenever there's a proposal, it's some people on one side, some people on the other. Thank God for the Preservation Foundation. I've lived a lot of places. Maybe there were similar organizations where I lived, but they had no presence that I recall. And this one here has a significant presence. I'm glad things aren't rubber stamped. Some people may argue they are, but I'm glad there's some level of protest, if you will, and questioning of things. And then there's adjustments made. But I get the feeling this project is going to move forward.
Adam, do you have any thoughts?
My main thought, because I read over some of the details of this project, and it looks like the developers are being very responsive to community concerns. We had my father taught me the saying in business is you always trust your professionals, right? So if there's a legal matter, you trust your lawyer. If there's an engineering problem, you trust your engineer. Health problem, you trust your doctor, right? And so I think in Saratoga, we are blessed to have these review boards and these committees and Saratoga Preservation Foundation that for the most part are volunteers who are subject matter experts in particular fields. So there can be a collaboration on these projects. And it's not, like Dan said, nothing's rubber stamped. You hear, and certain people are always going to want it, minimalistic, and developers would always want to go as big as they can. And we're just blessed as a community to have the citizens who serve on these boards. So I'm reading over, it sounded neat. They have a bike lane that connected Broadway and Hamilton Street, a pathway. The entrance to the building would be on Hamilton Street, so it wouldn't clog that downtown or Broadway with more traffic. Something that I'm worried about, that the Rip Van Dam Hotel there, and that corner is already a treacherous one. I have some real problems with that, but that's I'm glad they're being responsible, and responsible people are looking into it. Robin.
I have so much to say about this, you guys. I could probably fill up a whole show, and honestly, I'll try to keep it a lot faster than that. But there's two sides. I almost want to argue both sides of this. Okay, right? So for starters, there has been some protests by neighbors, specifically in Park Place, which is the huge condominium development that overlooks Congress Park. And I have to say, there's a touch of hypocrisy there, because when you look at what's being proposed across the street, they never show it with Park Place at the same time, which is directly across the street. Park Place had to be one of the most controversial projects that came before the city. They were talking about putting multi-million-dollar condominiums on Congress Park, right? On Congress Park. And somehow that went forward. It's been successful. It's been great. But the same people who are living in that place, in those condos, are the people who are objecting to the project across the street. And I just find that a little bit crazy. So now they met with me. They're not crazy people. They're rational people. I totally understand their concerns, but they met with me and they put together a petition, and largely their concerns had to do with, in my opinion, infrastructure and how much that would clog up that entry of South Broadway going onto Broadway. And I agree that we have infrastructure problems there, 100%. We have issues with traffic flow, without question. In the past, there have been proposals to put a traffic circle in outside of Congress Park. I am vehemently against that, just because I grew up learning how to drive in Manhattan. So I'm just against traffic circles in general. But that's not an informed opinion. That's just anecdotal opinion. But yeah, we have issues there with traffic. But then their primary argument was with safety. They thought it would make the neighborhood less safe. And that was something I had a really, really hard time getting my head around. And they even invoked the students at Spa Catholic as being less safe with that building being built. Now, I grew up in New York City. I went to school at Chapin on 84th and East End. I was surrounded by businesses. It was a great thing. If there's retail on the first floor of that building, that's awesome. Maybe there'll be a bagel place so the kids can walk in and get a snack in the middle of the day during their free time. I don't see any universe in which that makes the kids at Spa Catholic less safe. I think that's a bananas argument. However, I do think the other side of the coin here is our land use boards and how projects are approved in Saratoga Springs in general. We have 3 land use boards. We have zoning, planning, and design review. All 3 boards are appointed by the mayor. So they're all political appointments at the end of the day. They're not necessarily people who have expertise in the subject matter, as much as I'd like them to, Adam. They aren't. And there's no required training. There's no minimum requirement in terms of qualifications to be on these boards. They're simply political. For the most part, I think they do a great job. I think for the most part, mayors put people on them that understand what they're doing or want to be on them enough to educate themselves. But at the end of the day, let's not forget that they're political. I think the Preservation Foundation, totally separate thing. That's a 501c3 that's run by Samantha Boshart. They do excellent job, and they do excellent job preserving our historic properties. But in terms of things getting improved, I am someone who, I've said before in this program, I deeply believe in the Greenbelt and maintaining the Greenbelt and maintaining a dense urban core. This is a project that has been zoned as urban. This is a project where we say yes to development. This is where it's supposed to happen. So I encourage this kind of development downtown. And I will also say this building was announced when we went into lockdown in spring of 2020. at a time when I thought this city was going to go into financial ruin. So when someone stepped up and said they were going to invest this multi-million-dollar project downtown at a point when we thought our our local economy was on the brink of collapse, I was delighted. So I hope this project moves forward. I hope it moves forward successfully. And I think the concerns that the neighbors have or concerns people have over design will be addressed. And I think it'll be a great addition to our downtown community. So there's my long take, guys, my very long take.
Can I ask you, Robin, and it may be different today than it was 2 years ago, but what is the level of protest, I guess, by the people that live in Park Place? Is it very strong? Is it medium or?
Pretty significant. I would say it's on the level of protests I've seen over buildings. This is like at a medium level.
Okay.
Yeah.
It will change Hamilton Street quite a bit. Hamilton Street, I come home that way sometimes, and that's bottled up already. I can only, progress is not free.
But again, Adam, I think you both made a great point. The Rip Van Dam project, to me, again, blows my mind. I mean, talk about traffic issues. The corner of Washington and Broadway has got to be one of the most congested and dangerous corners we have in all of Saratoga, because that's where the truck routes come down and they turn north on Broadway. I mean, to add a hotel there is going to add a tremendous amount of pressure to our infrastructure and our roadways. Plus, you've got the Adelphi who are valeting people up the street on Washington. And so just in general, I think that these projects are great, but we really need to double down on our infrastructure and come up with some alternatives. And maybe this federal infrastructure money that's coming in and this committee that Mayor Kim is putting together, maybe this is one of those things they can address, although something tells me it won't be, but maybe.
Great. My last comment on this is other upstate New York cities would kill to have Saratoga Springs problems. Yes, there are issues, but I wouldn't trade with any other upstate city.
Yeah, and something that
couldn't agree more.
Something not to dive in on this show because it's a whole thing, but I know condos are assessed and taxed differently than standalone residential home. Some say it's unequitable. I think that's going to be something really interesting we should talk about in the future, because Robin, you were saying yes, this is putting money into our downtown and on our property tax rolls, but proportionally, is it fair? And so that's something we can talk about at a later date.
You know what? Maybe we should ask former Commissioner of Finance Michelle Madigan if she could come on and explain some of those things to us, because I think between that and also this buzz over reassessment that's happening, I don't know if you guys have been following this, but Dylan Moran campaigned strong on no reassessments in Saratoga Springs. It was like his primary campaign slogan. Well, now there's some reassessing that's happening per Commissioner Moran. So maybe we could ask former Commissioner of Finance Michelle Madigan to come on next week and explain some of the things in more detail, because I know I don't understand them at a granular enough level to describe them to viewers.
Yeah, I do, because I owned a condo and I challenged my assessment. And I used that law to get a very favorable result. It was all within the law. I just asserted my rights, but I'd certainly like Ms. Madigan as well. That'd be a good panel.
Yeah. So last topic, unless you guys have anything else you want to add to the development topic. All right. Well, I always say in Saratoga Springs, when people bellyache about development and it's in the urban core, how many vacancies would you like to see, folks? How much less progress would make you happy? Okay, let's think about that for a second. But all right, moving on. One of the last things that we wanted to talk about today, and it's going to be kind of a shorter episode because we know everyone's been on vacation, things have been a little bit slower, but Samantha Guerra was in court yesterday. Samantha Guerra was a candidate for the Commissioner of Accounts position this election cycle, and she was accused by the Democratic Party of forging several of the signatures on her petitions. What are petitions? Well, if you want to run for office, doesn't matter where you are in America, if you want to run for office, you have to get the endorsement of a political committee, a Republican committee, a Democratic committee, or you can decide to run as an independent candidate. Doesn't matter. Either way, you have to go out with these sheets of paper and you have to get people to sign them and basically say, yeah, we support your running for this position. And there's a certain number of signatures that you have to get. And it's very specific the way you fill it in. You have to have someone print their name and sign their name and write their address, and they have to do it. You can't have someone else do it on their behalf. And when Samantha Guerra turned in her petitions to establish actually an independent candidate line back in June, there were some discrepancies with the signatures. And it's something that I can speak to because I was also running at the time to be mayor here in Saratoga. And so when all the petitions were turned in to the Board of Elections, I drove down and picked up everyone's petitions because I wanted to see how many signatures everyone had gotten and who had signed. And, you know, this is kind of exciting stuff for people who are as dorky as I am and as obsessed with politics as I am. So I went down with Matthew Taylor, who's someone I worked with on my campaign, and we grabbed all the petitions, including the ones Samantha Guerra had done. And I would say within 10 minutes, we looked at each other and said, these petitions, there's no way these petitions are real. They were either little scrabbles like this, little nothings that were illegible, that were repeated throughout pages of signatures, or they were 5 signatures in a row that were the same exact block print. I mean, there were glaring errors. At the time, we filed a notice that told the Board of Elections that we were considering challenging her petitions. We ultimately decided not to because we wanted to focus on our own candidacies and just wasn't, we had no one running for Commissioner of Accounts. I was running for mayor, Adam was running for finance. So we really had no horse in that race. So there was no reason for us to challenge them. Dylan Brand, who was running against her, did challenge them. And it's still going on today. Now it is in court. She was charged criminally, I believe. Criminally, is that correct, Dan?
That
You
is
know off
correct.
the top of your head? Yeah, she was charged criminally. There was some controversy over whether or not she would get a fair shake in Saratoga County. The Republicans alleged that I manipulated the police department and the state police in bringing these accusations against Samantha Guerra, which is complete nonsense. I only wish I had that power, guys. I do not have that power, nor did I have anything to do with it. So I believe it was transferred to a Schenectady court. And they had a court date yesterday. We're waiting to see what the results are of that court date. But I just wanted to see if you guys had anything you wanted to talk about as it pertains to this issue. I know Tracy LaBelle also last week, I think, was accused of forging some signatures as well.
Yeah, I'll speak to this, Robin, because I was right along, beside you when we went through this. And the way this works is you hand in your petitions to the Board of Election, and then anybody can go and challenge those. They have 5 days to challenge those signatures. And essentially, and this happens, they can go and challenge a signature for whatever reason, and that signature can get thrown off. And if you get enough signatures, I mean, I think we needed 320, we got 450, something like that. Because you expect these signatures to be challenged. If you get enough, they're not going to mess around and challenge them. So what happened was we saw this, Robin, you caught it immediately with these glaring errors, but like you said, it really wasn't our race to get involved with, our fight to have. But something, and this is what kind of drives me nuts in politics, is that instead of the Democrats, instead of challenging those in that 5-day window, what's supposed to happen, they decided to save it until I think it was August or September, and then have these charges, which it's outside. You had their 5 days. It was a purely political move to have the most impact right before the election. So and the fact that now this is still going out, you have Tracy now. There's allegations from Pat Tudds, that have the Democratic chair, against Tracy. I think somebody is now, saying Ron had a signature that wasn't accurate or didn't match the voter rolls. I think at this point, this is kind of petty politics that we need to put aside and kind of move on with our elected officials. Samantha Guerra is slightly different because those were some pretty glaring discrepancies in hers. And yeah, and the thought being, did she actually forge them, or did she just give these sheets to friends to go around and write their kid's name on it, and what exactly level of fraud was going on? I guess it's for the courts to decide. But it was a really interesting learning experience in that campaign that we had, Robin.
Yeah, there's the two different silos, if you will. There's the administrative, did you comply with everything that the Board of Election requires? And they could be thrown out then. But that in and of itself doesn't rise to criminal. But in this case, and we see this in Troy a lot, Rensselaer County seems to be famous for these types of cases where they are alleged to be so bad that there's actually criminal activity that occurred. And that's what happened here. One of these carried over into the criminal realm in a complaint to the DA's office and the police department and so forth. And Robin, when I read that, I agreed with you when they accused you of orchestrating this. I mean, that was just hogwash. They needed to own what was happening there, and to blame you was ridiculous.
I know. I mean, considering that Dylan Moran came out and had a press conference that he streamed live where he announced all these accusations, I don't know how on God's green earth you could watch Dylan Moran's press conference accusing Samantha Guerra of this and somehow turn that into, oh, this is a Robin Dalton, project. It was ridiculous. So I appreciate your saying that. Well, we'll keep our eye on what happens there. And that brings us to our cheers and jeers for the week. What do we got, guys? There's got to be someone we're cheering and jeering.
I'll
Adam,
if you're good, I'll
Dan.
I want to hear Dan's first. I'm gonna copy his.
I'll jump in. This is going to shock you because I am a gadfly at heart, but I purposely do not have a jeer this week. I'm going to take my time to have a slightly longer cheer. Is a cheer to the New York Racing Association, NYRA. And anyone that knows me, follows my Saratoga Report or Saratoga Report Twitter account, should know that's significant because I'm often criticizing NYRA. But they have, horse racing is on its heels with all the allegations of doping and the Bob Baffert situation. Medina Spirit, first the poor horse died. Now it was just stripped of its Kentucky Derby win earlier this week. And NYRA has been going after Bob Baffert, and that's not an easy thing to do, right? He's got millions of dollars behind him, the best attorneys. He's going to ferociously fight any ban from NYRA tracks, which is what they implemented, and they had to create a hearing system to give him his due process, and they did, and that process has gone through. They're awaiting a hearing officer's decision on this, but I give them credit for trying to do their part to clean up this sport, and then they're aggressive with certainly other trainers with other issues as well. But the Bob Baffert situation is certainly the highest profile issue, and I give them credit for trying to save the sport. Because whether, again, if you love Saratoga but you're not a horse racing fan, I hope you're at least at the indifferent level and not anti-horse racing, because this city needs horse racing. We need NYRA. The city even needs Aqueduct in Belmont, so we have a racing circuit. So good for NYRA for protecting the brand. Good for NYRA for protecting horse racing.
Real quick, I want to chime in. What they really should do is just have them, form a BRC, a Bob, racing committee, like the, the Russian Olympic Committee. We'll just have a Baffert racing committee, and we'll take away his name off the. Yeah, his silks. He can't use his silk. His silks will just have to be something really bland, and that'll teach him. So.
Oh, was that totally crazy? Like, I was watching the Olympics and I'm like, who the hell is ROC? Oh, Russia, you're not allowed to participate, so you just make up a whole other committee? That was bananas. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I thought it was a Jay-Z
nothing to do
team.
with Saratoga. Yeah, I couldn't believe that. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
So that's it for me on my long cheer there.
You're up, Adam. What do you got?
All right. So for my jeer today, it's Commissioner Montenegro. When asked about some of the crime, did I steal yours, Robin?
No, I just love it.
All right. When asked about some of the crime problems going on Caroline Street, he came straight out of a Lil Wayne concert and blamed gangster rap on it. And again, used the fact that he went to a rap concert. It's not a good look. It's not accurate. There's a problem there, but to blame a genre of music that I'm guessing, even though he did go to a concert SPAC, he's not much an expert in. It just was not a good look for him, and not a good look for the city. So
Jimmy,
yeah,
Jimmy, we just came off the halftime show. Jimmy, we just came off the best halftime show ever with Dre, with Snoop, with all these people. Everyone was
upside down,
it, and
upside down 50 cents. I know, it's like the next thing is
cent.
The next thing we could do is just go off the Footloose and just ban dancing. That's what. No more dancing in Saratoga.
I mean, so I'm telling you, I saw that headline, Adam, and I walked home listening to Dr. Dre. And the second I put my headphones, I just started committing crimes. I just started going crazy, committing crimes. I don't know what happened. I haven't been able to stop since.
Somebody should do it as like a straight out of Saratoga May or May. Is that how you say it? Mame? I don't know. That's the French way. And so that's my jeer, my cheer. My cheer really goes to everybody who's been giving us feedback. It's a lot of people are coming out saying that they really like listening to the show. There's, you know, they don't always agree with us, and they like that we don't always agree, and we're not going to always agree. So, you know, everybody who reached out, and, you know, that it means a lot, because, you know, we don't get paid for this. This is something, a passion of ours. So, you know, we appreciate the positive feedback. So thank you to all of our listeners. Robin will give the email before we leave. If you have questions, something you want to talk about, you want to tell us we're doing something good or bad, let us know, because feedback, we love it, and it really kind of helps us know exactly how we're performing. So anyway, cheers to you, Saratoga.
Thank you. Can I quickly add, Robin, that we have almost 300 hits on the YouTube, the YouTube channel you created.
Yeah.
For our last
guys.
show, which went way long, so that we were happy with that. Thank you for watching.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so quickly, my quick cheers and jeers. First of all, I love Adam Israel so much because he says things like meme when he's talking about a meme. I love it. I love you so much, Adam. I love your memes.
I'm not a pop culture guy.
I love it so much. I I've like kind of blanked on my cheer and jeer for the week. Shit, guys, excuse me, expletive happening. What were my cheers and jeers? They were good. I swear they were good. I got to think of them. But real quick housekeeping note before we wrap this up. We were going to talk about Daryl Mount today. We were going to talk about the Daryl Mount investigation and a lot of the things that had been happening over the last week and a half in terms of Daryl Mount. But this has been a vacation week. There are not a lot of people around, and we're committed to having that conversation with a broader variety of people and a more inclusive diversity of opinion. And so we will be having that conversation. We'll be having it with guests, and we look forward to having that panel. I just wanted to make sure our viewers knew that we hadn't forgotten about that. We just want to have the most substantive and inclusive conversation possible when we talk about Daryl Mount. So that will be coming up.
Real quick, I want to put on a teaser too. I had an interesting, you know, recently there was a new witness that came out, and WNYT did a big headline on it, and they showed him being interviewed, and in talking with him, how he was portrayed and what actually happened was not how the WNYT, portrayed it, at least in his opinion. So I'd like to talk more about that, you know, when we dive into that report longer, because it made this gentleman look something like he wasn't. So we could talk about that when we dive deeper into the show, into the report.
I think what Adam is saying to people is that Adam has actually a personal relationship with the gentleman who came forward recently. And I know talked to him after the fact, after the WNYT reports, and it sounds like he had more to say and more context to give rather than what we just saw in the WNYT reports. And I'm going to say no shade to Mark Mulholland, because I think he does a phenomenal job. I just think it's the nature of the beast. You know what I mean? You get sound bites, you get your 2 or 3 minutes to have your story, and sometimes it doesn't reflect everything you want to say. So I don't know if that's WNYT's fault at all, but you know, if Tommy wants to give us more, you know, detail through you or however, we would love to hear his story and why he spoke up, because it is a really important part of this conversation. So aside from that, my cheer and jeer, I guess I'm going to jeer the fact that actually we do have school vacation this week, because my God, I feel like my kids haven't actually been in school for like a continuous period of time and forever. I mean, did they need a week off? No, they didn't. Is it making their mother a little bit crazy? Yep, it's making me a little crazy. Aside from that, cheers to you guys for doing this. Cheers to everyone who's given us so much awesome feedback. You can find us as We're Talking Saratoga on YouTube. Subscribe, like our videos, share them, and email us at info@talkingsaratoga.com for any feedback. You can go to talkingsaratoga.com online to watch episodes, but we really have them shot out on YouTube, and then all our social media channels, including the Saratoga Report, Adam's group, What's Going On Saratoga, my Facebook page, which is just called Robin Dalton. Got to think of a more exciting title, guys. But I think that's all we've got for the week. We're really looking forward to seeing you next week. So signing off. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dan. We'll talk soon.
Hey, charming
Bye-bye.
Saratoga.